So, for the tier 1 zombie slayer boss, you only need an undead sword, which you can buy for 100 coins at the weaponsmith. So, for the tier 2 zombie slayer boss, you need a full set of glacites with growth 5 and protection 5, which you can get from killing glacites in the dwarven mines or from the auction house for 50k per piece. Then you also need a raider's axe, which you can get from the lonely Viking in the park for 150,000 coins. You also need a wand of healing, which you can get at Zombie Slayer level 1. This won't cost you that much. The Zombie Slayer boss will take you 200 normal zombie kills. That's why you should get the kills in the dwarven mines, but then spawn him in the graveyard. For the tier 3 zombie slayer boss, you need a full set of 5-star rotten or wise dragon armor. The rotten armor you can get from dungeons, and the wise dragon armor you can get from the auction house for 1 to 2 mil. You can also get a dreadlord sword, 5-star. As a pet, you should take the sheep pet, but it's not necessary. You should also have roughly 100 magical power. With all of this, you should easily be able to kill the crypt ghouls and with them summon the boss. As for the tier 4 boss, you will need a full set of Shadow Assassin or Necromancer Lord if you can't survive. These you can get from the dungeon floors 5 and 6. You should also have a Livid Dagger, which you can also get from floor 5. As a pet, you should take any damage pet with a turtle helmet. Magical power you should have at roughly 200. Now, the tier 5 boss is much harder than the tier 4. For this boss, you will need an Overflux, which you can get from Wolf Slayer 7, a Wand of Atonement with Ultimate Wise 5, which you unlock at Zombie Slayer 7, a Reaper Falcon, which you can get at Zombie Slayer 6, an Aspect of the Void, or Aspect of the End, and a Florid Zombie Sword. For armor, you take a full set of Necron with a Tarantula helmet, or a full set of Reaper, which you can get from Zombie Slayer 7. As for pets, if you're wearing Reaper armor, you should go with the Zombie pet, and if you're wearing Necron, you should go with the Damage pet. All of these need a turret helmet. For magical power, you should have roughly 300. So, for the first Spider Slayer boss, you will need a full set of glaciate armor, which you can buy on the auction house for roughly 10k per piece. You will also need a raider's axe, which you can get from the lonely Viking after completing his quest. With all of this, you should easily be able to kill the tier 1 Spider Slayer boss. For the tier 2 Spider Slayer boss, you will need the same stuff that you had for the tier 1, so a full set of glaciate with a raider's axe, but you'll probably also need a wand of mending. The Spider Slayer tier 3 boss requires a full set of Wise Dragon armor with shadow goggles, which you can buy from the auction house, and an NPC in the dungeon. You should also have a Dreadlord sword, which you can get from the earlier stages of dungeons, and a wand of mending, which you can get from Zombie Slayer. So, for the tier 4 Tarantula Broodfather, you will need a full set of Shadow Assassin, which you can drop from floor 5 in dungeons. Also, a Livid Dagger, which you can also drop from floor 5. You also need a Wand of Mending or Restoration, which you can drop from Zombie Slayer, and a Radiant Power Orb, which you can get from lower tiers of Wolf Slayer. So, the first Wolf Slayer boss requires a full set of glaciate armor, which you can get from killing glaciates in the Dwarven Mines or buy on the auction house for roughly 20k per piece. You also need a Raider's Axe, which you can get upon the Lonely Viking, a Wand of Mending, which you can get upon reaching Zombie Slayer 3, and a Rogue Sword, which you can get from a villager. For the tier 2 Wolf Slayer boss, you will need the same things as you did for the tier 1. A full set of glaciate armor with growth 5 and protection 5. A Raider's Axe with sharpness, and a Wand of Mending. As for the tier 3 boss, for this boss you will need a full set of Shadow Assassin or Necromancer Lord if you can't survive. These you can get from the auction house after beating floor 6 or floor 5. You will also need a Livid Dagger, which you can also get from floor 5, and any pet that has a turret helmet. For the Tier 4 Sun Pack Master boss, you will need a full set of Mastiff armor, which you can get upon reaching Wolfslayer 4 with Tier 3s, and also a Pooch or Shaman sword, which you can get at Wolfslayer 5 and 6. You will also need a Radiant Power Ore, as it heals 1% of max HP per second, and with Mastiff you gain a lot of HP, but no defense. You will also need to use the magical power Silky to give you a lot of crit damage. As a pet, you should use the legendary wolf with a turtle helmet, but you can also use any pet with a turtle helmet. For the first working Seraph boss, you will need a full set of Shadow Assassin, which you can get from floor 5 or buy it on the auction house. If you can't afford this, you should take Ender Armor, which you can get by killing Enderman in the end. You will also need a Livid Dagger or a Void Sword, and an Aspect of the End. As a pet, try to use the Enderman pet, at least at level 50. This can be epic or rare if you want. You will also need to have roughly 100 magical power. As for the second working Seraph boss, for this one you will need a full set of Final Destination with 5 to 10k kills. This you can get from beating Void Doom Seraph Tier 1 until you've reached Enderman Slayer level 4. As a weapon, you will need the Void Edge Katana, which you can get upon reaching Enderman Slayer level 3. You will also need a Wand of Atonement from Zombie Slayer level 7 with Ultimate Wise 5, an Aspect to the End or an Aspect to the Void, and a Mana Flux, which you can get from Wolf Slayer 6. As a pet, use an Epic Enderman pet, level 70 or above. And for magic power, use Bloody, tune your stat points to strength or crit damage, or if you can't survive, HP. You should have roughly 300 magical power, but between 200 and 300 is also okay. The Tier 3 boss is very hard. For this boss, you will also need a full set of Final Destination, although I would suggest maybe recomming it and getting 25,000 kills. You will also need an Overflux or a Mana Flux, but an Overflux is preferable, a Wand of Atonement with Ultimate Wise 5, an Aspect to the Void, a Vorpal Katana, maybe recommed, with Ultimate Wise 5, and some summons, which you can get from dungeons through a Necromancer sword, or just buying on the auction house. Try and get super tank zombies or tank zombies. You will also need a Florid Zombie Sword to heal yourself. As a pet, use an Enderman pet, epic at level 100 or maybe even legendary. For magical power, try and get roughly 500, but a bit less is also fine. As for the tier 4 boss, this boss is much harder than the tier 3, although it doesn't have any new special attacks except for one. You will need a full set of Final Destination, definitely recommed, with hot potato books, and roughly 50k kills or more, an Aspect of the Void, an Overflux, a Wand of Atonement, and an Atom Split Katana, probably recommed with Ultimate Wise 5. You also need some summons and a Florid Zombie Sword. Try and get a Mythic Enderman Pet to gain some more XP, but a Legendary is probably also fine. You can also get an Ender Dragon Pet to do more damage, but that costs a lot. For magical power, you will need roughly 700 with an Ender Artifact, which you can buy from the auction house, although this is quite expensive. So, for the first Blaze Slayer boss, you will need a full set of Necron armor with a Tarantula helmet, preferably recombed. This you can get from the auction house or from floor 7. You will also need an Overflux or a Mana Flux, a Wand of Atonement with Ultimate Wise 5, which you can get upon reaching Zombie Slayer level 7. You will also need an Aspect of the Void and a Giant Sword, which you can get from floor 6. And you will also need a Blaze Pet with roughly 300 magical power. For the tier 2 Blaze Slayer boss, you will need a full set of Crimson armor, or if you can't survive, Sorrow. You will also need an Overflux, Wand of Atonement, Aspect of the Void, and 2 daggers, which you can get from Blaze Slayer. You will also need a Blaze Pet and roughly 500 to 600 magical power. The tier 3 boss is much harder than the tier 2, but for this boss, you need roughly the same gear, just upgraded a lot. You will still need Crimson armor, just try and get this to the 4th tier, Fiery. You will also need the 2 daggers, try and get these to tier 2. You will also need an Aspect of the Void and various healing items like a Hyperion, Florid Zombie Sword, or Wand of Atonement. You will also need a Plasma Flux. As for magical power, you should get roughly 800 or 900, and as a pet, use the Golden Dragon Pet. for the tier 4 boss, you will need a full set of Sorrow or Crimson, like for the other bosses. Just try and get this to Infernal tier. You will also need the tier 3 daggers, which you can get from Blaze Slayer, and Aspect of the Void, plus Plasma Cup, and various other healing items like Hyperion, Florid Zombie Sword, and Wand of Atonement. You will also need roughly 1000 magical power and a golden dragon pet. With this boss, you will also need a lot of skill, so you might need to practice it over and over again. So, for the first Vampire Slayer boss, you will need some femur growth leggings, some sneak and sneak boots. You will also need a used detransfigured face and an orange chestplate. As a weapon, use the self-recursive pickaxe, and you should also probably get an aspect of the leech. Try and also get some accessories and all of the Montuna's soul pieces and as many as you can of the Enigma souls. As for the tier 2 Vampire Slayer boss, for this boss you will need the same stuff as you needed for the tier 1 and a legendary anti-bite scarf. You will also need a silver lace karambit, a stake, some holy ice, and a juicy healing melon. Try and also get some more accessories and maybe even complete the rift guide. Tier 3 Vampire Slayer boss requires the same stuff as you need for the tier 2, plus some leggings of the Coven, a mythic anti-bite scarf, a silver twist karambit, a luscious healing melon, and a weirder chuba. This you don't really need, but definitely better. You should also have nearly every single accessory, plus should have definitely completed the Rift Guide, except maybe Shen's auctions. So, for the tier 4 boss, you will additionally need a lively Sepsia chestplate, and definitely a weighted chuba with all the things mentioned before. Definitely completed the whole Rift Guide and gotten nearly every single accessory. You might also want a Vampire Dentist artifact, but you don't need that, and try and eat some of McGrubba's burgers. But again, this is not necessary. So, for the tier 5 boss, you basically just need stuff for the tier 4 and a lot more practice. You will also need the Vampire Dentist relic and all of McCarver's burgers. Just try and get the max amount of rift time.